what happened to gas prices when Russia invaded Ukraine? Very high, very, very high. If you don't know, gas went to like $6, $7, right? Extremely expensive. Why exactly was that happening? It's because Russia supplies a lot of oil to like countries in Europe. Once that got cut off, right? Supply and demand. Supply is low. Demand is going to be very high. The price is going to push up. That was really bad, right? How many consumers were hurt? How many people that were like middle class weren't able to get gas to go to their jobs, right? Huge effect just on what one country did. So stability is pretty important, okay? So that's another thing, right? What is the other contention that we have on the pro? We have a second one.
It's Chinese
revisionism, right? I'm just gonna write revisionism, right? Who can quickly explain what that contention is? Not you. You explain too much. Need someone else. All right, go ahead and explain it. FIFA?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, it's been a long time since we reviewed it. That's fair.
China's rise?
Basically, right? Remember, the world order is relatively stable. But stability still means that the power is going to be like the US, China, and then Russia maybe, right? Or maybe they're tied or something, right? China generally does want to displace the US. Generally true. They want to grow faster, they want to have more industry, industrialization, and they do want more infrastructure. Those goals, unfortunately, do kind of like interfere with the US's goal, right? Because the US obviously is not going to give up their spot so easily.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. It's likely that all the reasons that the pro is saying, right? All the reasons on our pro case about why China wants to go to war or do something adventurous, probably true. I'm gonna say if we had a truth rating, it would be like here. Realistically, it's true, right? China has a very declining workforce, so they know that they're not gonna be able to tax their new generation as quickly. More Chinese people are emigrating out of China, so they don't have that much income coming in to fund their all infrastructure projects. They generally know that they're in a lot of debt, and they don't have, like, the Chinese yuan is not that strong as the dollar, so they can't just print more money. So their time to act is like shortening, right? Like, this is generally true. But unfortunately, I don't think that the case is particularly right, like that the one thing that they would do is go for Taiwan. I think you could make arguments why they would go for Taiwan. You could say, okay, China needs to build, bring up their economy. They're going to make a move for Taiwan so that they can grab their semiconductor factories, and then they're gonna control that supply so that they can raise prices and come back in the game to beat the US. I think that might be true, right? But in the grand scheme of things, is it very likely that they're going to start a war almost for Taiwan? I don't know. They have done a lot of very aggressive things over Taiwan, right? Still, it's pretty dangerous to talk about Taiwan in mainland China. So I would say the revisionism argument, it's probably here. Like, it leans towards the pro being right, but the con has some good points that they can make, and you can convince your judge. Yes?
But I don't think it'd be, like, logical to attack Taiwan, since, like, if you take over them, like, the United States and, like, most other superpowers will probably, like, put, like, taxes on them.
Yeah, they're going to do those things called tariffs, remember? They're going to heavily, these are not tariffs, sorry, sanctions. Anyone know what sanctions is? It's basically a threat. It's like, unless you do something, I'm going to take away, like your mom might make a sanction on you. She's like, unless you do your homework, I'm going to take away your iPad. Something like that, right? So in the case of Taiwan, the US might be like, okay, we send $50 billion of aid to you every year. We're going to take that away unless you publicize your semiconductors and don't give them all to Taiwan. That might start conflict, right? He is right that, if China does make a move for Taiwan, like, Taiwan's not a very big island, right? And it definitely doesn't have as much military as mainland China. So they're going to lose. They're 100% going to lose. The only thing that Taiwan has going for them is that they're allies with us. And they're only allies with us because we need their semiconductor chips to make iPhones and computers and stuff like that, right? So, yeah, probably true. If China ever actually makes a move against Taiwan, it's going to be bad, like really, really bad. In fact, there was something in the news that happened a few weeks ago about we were going to send a peace delegate to China, and then they made some comments about Taiwan, and then we didn't do that anymore. So it's still like, there's still like a bunch of tension and conflict there, right? So that's why I say the revisionism contention is probably here. If I was the pro, I would maybe, and let's say they spent a lot of time talking about this contention, just leave it. Let's just move on, go for this one. Because realistically, I think you're more likely right here, right? And this one, remember what are the counter arguments that the negative has to say here? They're gonna say it's irrational for China to just completely lash out. right? Like, they generally want to keep the world order too. And if it really comes, maybe they can communicate with the US to work out some agreement where they can take some of the semiconductors, or maybe make Taiwan its own independent state or something like that, right? Whole bunch of stuff there. So this is the pro, these are the counterattacks. This is where truth generally lies. And notice how it's not one side is right, one side is wrong, right? This gap here, 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 that's what you argue. These are arguments you make. I'm just saying in the grand scheme of things, if you look at every single research paper, every single thing, this is where it would lie. But here's the thing, a debate round is only 30 minutes, right? You can't do all that. And one side has to win. So one side, and there's no way that this one is gonna win every single time, right? Because if the pro won every single round, it really wouldn't be debate. So there's always room for the con to win. You just have to find that room and then win. That make sense? Okay, so now let's talk about the con, right? We're gonna do the same activity, but we're gonna go in the reverse order. And I'm gonna leave this up here, I'm just gonna do it here, okay? So, what's our con first contention? You guys, oh wait, do you guys have it pulled up? Maybe go pull up the con case right now.
Arms raising.
It is arms raising, I believe, right? Yes, we just wrote it down, so it should be. Okay, quickly summarize. Anyone know what this is? We just heard it. You guys have the con case on your flow right now. So this is a good exercise. Tell me what this contention is, and then what is like important about it.
The risk of nuclear war.
Right.
Beijing and Moscow together.
Yeah.
Causing global war extinction.
Yeah. Basically, that's exactly what it is. It's the same stuff that we talked about here. It's basically saying, remember we talked about, is the world really that stable right now? Not really, right? Like, look at all the stuff that's going on in the Middle East and China and Russia, and then all the stuff in Latin America. There's like insurgencies and stuff like that every single day. So yeah, generally, you know, the US, you can say it's doing pretty good, but really it's not doing that great, right? So what arms racing is basically saying is that eventually we're gonna lose. Realistically, we might lose, right? Because let's say, you know, the US, we have our military. Let's say an attack happens in the South China Sea with China and Taiwan. Then let's say Russia makes a really deep, you know, incursion to Ukraine. And then let's say in the Middle East something happens and one of our allies loses. Realistically, how are we supposed to get to all three of those areas at once, defend every single one of those areas, prevent as many casualties as possible, and we're playing defense, we're not even playing offense, right? You guys ever play basketball? Offense most likely always wins because, you know, you're there first. So those three areas, we're really stretched out, right? And we might snap. So that's what the arms racing contention is saying. It's saying we've basically been pretty stretched out, and if we keep stretching out further, it's gonna be bad because our allies, not our allies, our enemies, like Russia and China, are gonna team up, which they've already done, by the way. A Sino-Russian alliance meeting generally happens every 3 years. So they already are talking to each other. And if we overstretch, we're gonna lose. But what I think the con case kind of lacks is like a so what. And I added this in the first version of the case, but then I took it out in the second version because I think you should start this debate later in your second speech, right? The so what, right, was what I'm talking about is, well, what do you propose, right? So the pro, that's their big argument. Truth scale, I'm gonna probably say here. Con is probably right about that. Realistically, we are really overstretched. You guys know the debt, military budgets. We're spending too much. How are we gonna keep spending more and more and more and then prevent casualties in every single area? Doesn't make that much sense, right? But the pro is gonna say, okay, what? Like, what do you want us to do, right? Do you want us to like completely pull away? Do you want China and Russia to suddenly become world leaders? Do you want like us to lose all of our power, right? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, what do you want us to do? And the solution that you need to give on con is something called multipolarity. Okay, very complicated word, very simple what it means. Right now we have the US as one major power. We're gonna divide up that power between a bunch of different states. Maybe this can be Germany, France, the UK, this can be Russia, China. Basically, all the power gets divided. Does that make sense? So that it's a stable world. Okay, the big thing that the con is going for is that it's not the world of the US or not the US. It's the US alone or the US with a bunch of people sharing power. Okay, now on this sharing power thing, where do I think it's on the truth scale? Any ideas? Where do you all think sharing power is? Good, bad, what are your thoughts on it? Bad? I think it's bad.
like sharing is bad.
Sharing is jab, right? You don't want to give your candy away. I would generally agree with you. I think, yeah, I don't think it's really possible because, like, how is the UK and like Germany supposed to match like China, right, as equals? Like, why would China ever accept that, right? Like, it does not make any sense when China is like 3 times bigger and is like a world contender. If anything, multipolarity is probably just going to be the US going from the US, Russia, and China of relatively equal powers. But even that doesn't even make a lot of sense, right? Because, I mean, are they equal? Like, eventually one of them is going to want to take power, right? Wouldn't that start more conflict? So I think the world of the pro is generally right here, which is that unipolarity, which is just the US, is going to be better than multi. But there's also more arguments you can make, right? Like, they don't understand the world right now. And that's the second part of the contention, which is, why is the world so dangerous? Really, why is the world so dangerous? And it all comes back to this idea about trade, okay? Small countries, even if they're small, generally do benefit from trade, right? Like Argentina. Argentina is not a really big country, but it gets a lot of economic movement, it gets a lot of money from exporting beef, right? They have so much land to grow beef, and they make a lot of cows, and they send a lot of it to us and everywhere, okay? If, for example, Argentina suddenly can't export beef anymore, they're going to get angry, right? Their whole source of income just got lost, and now they have a country which is starving because there's no money and they can't tax the people, and there's going to be a riot, which is bad, right? So they're generally going to be angry. So what do? Maybe they think now is the time to step up in Latin America, maybe displace Mexico or Colombia. Maybe they think now is the time to become or displace Brazil. Maybe they think now is the time to become a leader so that they don't need to rely on other countries and sending stuff to other countries. They can just make their own stuff by industrializing. And how do you get power? You have to take it, right? You need to forcibly take it. So that will lead to conflict. That's not great. So the neg is saying that the whole theory of why we have war is wrong. The reason why we have war is because countries are unsatisfied. They're dissatisfied with the way that the world is working right now. They want to change that, and they're going to change that through violence. Okay, now where do I think that is on the truth scale? We draw the thing right here. I think it's true. Okay, I'm going to draw 2. Okay, it's true for very small countries. Let's say Kazakhstan, Armenia, Israel. Really, really small countries that actually do want to take and step up in their region. Pretty true. I think the con is pretty right about that. But for big countries like Russia, China, and the US, probably not true. They're just not going to start a random war here and there to get power, right? Because of that big thing. They hurt way more. Like, think about it. If you have nothing to lose,